So we're going to be looking at some of the cargo crime hotspots in the EMEA region and gaining some local perspectives from experts working in these countries. So I would like to introduce our panel as Torsten's putting the signs out, and please do all come up as I introduce you. Richard Van Cleef, General Manager, Ferry Division, DFDS Seaways. Dario Novella from Tappa EMEA Regional Lead for Italy. Ilyas Melentsev, Tappa EMEA Regional Lead for the CIS, and André de Venage, Tappa EMEA Regional Lead, South Africa. Gentlemen, come and join us on stage. There you are. Can I shut, Torsten, can I shut that? Okay, there we go. That's right, I can stay if you want. Thank you. Okay, great. So, Torsten, let me begin with you, and then I think we'll probably tackle each country individually. Gentlemen, again, thank you for being with us. Torsten, on the screen shortly, we'll be able to see some pretty big and worrying numbers, but it's still far from the full story, isn't it? Is it becoming even more difficult to collect cargo crime intelligence, and what can be done to improve the situation?
Yeah, I think I repeat myself quite often. I'm sorry for this one already, but first of all, it is crazy numbers, you know. And even if we thought that in some cases cargo crime is going down, and the good news is, and we have a lot of statistics for that, if you are, you know, a TAPA member and implement the TAPA standards and live the culture and the vision, the mission, and the strategy of TAPA, you know, you're in a position to decrease your losses in average by more than 76%. So that's an impressive number, and we can show you and we can prove it. I think that's the good news. The bad news is that you will be constantly under attack, and you can do whatever you want. You always will be under attack, because it's a very attractive business for the criminals. What we see is the tip of the iceberg. And unfortunately, really nobody is having the right numbers, but as already said yesterday, you know, the good news is that our IIS tool and our TIS, or IIS information, and the TIS tool is recognized as the best information in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and we still invest into that, and we need you, okay? Again, we need you. Don't be afraid, come to me, you will never see, nobody will see it, you know, but it's quite interesting, and just to give you one more thing on this one, we know from some police forces, you know, and we hear later today from Sweden, and there's a number that the police is having more than 1,000 reports in a year. We have roughly 200. So there you can see a gap already. So we need to fix this, and we need to close the gap.
In your last update, you mentioned law enforcement agencies with the TIS. Now, Tappa EMEA offers free membership to law enforcement agencies to help encourage that information sharing. You touched on it briefly, but is that working, and what can you offer police forces which give cargo crime data to the association? What can you offer them?
Yeah, I think first of all, as I already said, you know, first of all, they get a free membership, you know, which is, I would like to say, normal, because we need to support our people from the police forces. Secondly, you know, if you give us data, we create reports for you. But that's not all, you know. I would like to give you some specific examples what is happening in our office nearly every week. We give you the network, we give you the right people, and we give you the right context. So 2 weeks ago, I received a police call from a police force in Germany. And they said to me, Torsten, we have a truck here with a, and I'm sorry to say it, with a Romanian license plate. And we have a lot of TVs inside, which we strongly believe are not really from media market. And for me, it was easy, because I had only one question. I said, which brand is it? So they gave me the brand. I knew immediately who it was, but I go normally to the members database, I pick the name, I give them the contact details and the mobile phone number from the security manager from this company. And they receive the information within 5 minutes that all TVs were stolen from one of their warehouses. Okay, so it's very, very effective, especially for police forces. And this is what we give to the police. We give them direct access to the people which are in charge in the company. I give you an easy task, okay? Call Volkswagen and ask for the security guy who is in charge of cargo crime via the normal number, the customer number. And I wish you good luck on this one. Do this with HP or Samsung or whatever. It's very difficult. You know it. If you are a global company, it's very difficult to get the person who's in charge of something, especially security. It's very difficult, and that's what we do. We support them wherever we can.
Now, as this panel demonstrates, you're putting a lot of effort into putting boots on the ground across the EMEA region to gather intelligence. Which other countries are you targeting in terms of a bigger, greater presence?
First of all, it's really a little bit the East European part. It's always quite funny, that. And secondly, I think it's the big countries still. We have a lot of data from UK. We have excellent data from the Netherlands, from Denmark. We receive a lot of data from France, but it can be more, I must say, because we know it's not the reality. I think it's also quite important that we focus on Spain, Italy, and Portugal, for example. We have good relationships there, but we can always be better.
And is there anything that you've not mentioned already that members can do in addition to that to help?
Yeah, the good news on this one is, that members are in the field. You are sitting in the country where we are not. Okay, I can give you, so for example, in Sweden, whomever is sitting in Sweden, and of course I will grab the police officer later. He's not allowed to leave the stage when he will not sign that he will share the data. No, just kidding. But if you are sitting in a country, if you have a good police contact, let us know. You do the intro, we do the rest, because it's always good to have a connection, and we give them, whatever we can. And that's really the only task we would like to give to our members. Like Austria, it's the same stuff. If you have a good contact in Austria, let us know. Okay, and we will be there. We do the rest. So for you, the work is only to connect us to the right people.
Torsten, thank you. And we will come back to you for a final word after we've had some other questions. So here on the slide, we can see the top 10 countries which have recorded cargo crimes in EMEA in 2021. And as I said earlier, I'm delighted to say we have specialists from some of these countries to tell us a bit more. We'll just take it country by country. So let's begin with South Africa and turn to Andre for some insight. So Andre, firstly, can you give us an overview of the cargo crime situation in South Africa and the risks that companies face? And I'll ask you all that as well.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. Afternoon, everybody. So yesterday, Joe Ryan made a presentation about Europe. And Joe, if you don't mind, I'm going to use some of your examples because it's basically a carbon copy of what's happening in South Africa. And if I can briefly talk about increased cost of living, obviously fuel is affecting everybody. Illegal migration has been a problem in South Africa forever, I think the past 20 years especially. Fuel theft, we've seen major incidents with even the main fuel line running from Durban to Johannesburg, billions lost. Russian organized crime, we have everybody in South Africa, not just the Russians, we have everybody, everybody's there. Cross-border crimes, port backlogs, yes, for sure. Driver shortages, cyber attacks, container shortages, strikes, activism, and protests. Too many to mention. But we have a very strong security contingent, which makes a big difference.
What would you say, Andre, do you regard, though, as the most pertinent threats to the supply chain security?
I think the indecision of our government, to a large extent, unfortunately, creates a lot of uncertainty in the markets, for investment specifically. I had a discussion with the lady in front here, the presentation yesterday from Europol, and not to be funny, but I think there's a lack of intelligence to be intelligent in certain areas, unfortunately. But major risks, I think I've mentioned those. There's too many strikes. There's talk of a national lockdown from all the union industry coming this week, perhaps. But we'll see. Too much violence. Last year we had major attacks on warehouses, theft, thousands just storming a warehouse and taking it over and removing. And up to till today, we haven't seen any arrests, unfortunately. So.
With these figures, the official government crime statistics, which indicate that 3 to 4 cargo trucks are hijacked daily in South Africa, is that a fair assessment, do you think? And is the situation becoming out of control?
I think it's a rising problem. What is not included, unfortunately, with the 3 to 4 truck hijackings is the smaller vans. It's not regarded as a truck, so it's not listed by our police services as a hijacking. So that figure can actually escalate to around 6, 7, I would say, per day. It's not out of control because those companies that have bought into the TAPA system and the +1s, as we saw yesterday, and perhaps in South Africa sometimes we have a +3 on FSR and TSR. For many years, those companies are doing very well. And I can, without mentioning specific names or too many names, but the DHLs of the world, and. So a lot of the companies have been way in front over the years, and they're doing very well because we understand the environment and we understand what to do. But those companies that still suffer are just ignorant, I would say, perhaps. These companies that I deal with that never had a problem, all of a sudden they do, and now they're coming on board with TAPA, asking the right questions. So I think it's a bit of all those issues that people don't want to spend money, etc., the old issues that we have, but unfortunately crime is a big driver, and people are starting to sit up and listen, yeah.
And going into more detail on that, are there any internal inefficiencies, which are causing the most supply chain failures that you could highlight?
I would say, on a risk matrix, we're not going to necessarily list communication as a problem, but I often find that communication seems to be a big problem everywhere. A person say one thing and he meant something different, and there's no clarification, and often that leads to serious misunderstandings on all levels and what people can do about crime. But the insider threat, in South Africa, the insider threat is rife. And if you control, obviously, it's similar to me to control closer to the asset, the closest to the asset. That's where you have the best measures in place. And insider control is what you can control at the end of the day. So those companies that get it right, I believe, is controlling the insider threat. There's an African saying that says, if you look after the insider, the outsider cannot hurt you. I think Winston Churchill also used it at some stage.
Andre, thank you very much. I think what we'll do is, as I said, we'll talk country by country first, but we will open it to the floor at the end. So if you do have any questions for any specific people, we can have more of a discussion at the end when we've covered all the different areas. So, of course, a big challenge in terms of supply chain resilience on both sides of the channel concerns migrants trying to cross borders. So we're joined by Richard Van Cleef from the Ferry Division of DFDS Seaways. Richard, thanks also for joining us.
Thank you.
Can you just also maybe start by saying what are your own experiences of migrant intrusion and the challenges that this presents?
Yeah, we have a challenge on a daily basis. Last night I just received reports of immigrants trying to climb into the units and try to be shipped to the UK. Last week we found 18 immigrants in a reefer unit. This was an unaccompanied unit. Dus the driver was booked to go with the ferry. Last year we had 485 number of immigrants in Vlaardingen. 80% we found them in Vlaardingen, so 20% made it, but were found by UK Border Force or reports from customers. And it's a daily struggle actually. The main problem is that it's not a very sexy subject, and that sounds a little bit weird, but the main subject in the port of Rotterdam is drugs, and immigrants are not sexy. It's so when you ask for help by the Dutch authorities that, for example, our seaport police needs more budget for dogs so they can check the units, then there's silence, and that's disturbing. And what doesn't help is that last year we had 485 and now we are 126, and it's now June, so that means that the number is lower, which means there's no much more of an importance for the government to act.
And in terms of these incidents, do they frequently occur in similar places? Where do they frequently occur, or are you seeing any shift in locations?
Yeah, we saw a shift, I think it was last year, when we had a high number of immigrants that drivers were staying on the parking lots before they entered the terminal, just to get some rest and to have a good night's sleep. That immigrants were cutting themselves through the roof, and now we see tear lines that are being cut and reconnected with tie wraps or metal wires. But we also see that the end of the tear line there's a metal plate and they cut it, and then they remove the seal intact. And then when the immigrants are on board, they replace it, and then it looks like there's nothing going on, and that makes it very difficult for my security team to discover the immigrants. Of course, the dogs are 100% effective, but I can't have 24-hour dog patrol. I still have a boss to report. And you also say, yeah, we're here to ship trailers, not to check every trailer on immigrants, because otherwise we won't depart on time. So yeah, that's an...
So what actions though, are you taking to address these issues then?
Well, when we find immigrants, we also make a security report, and on that report we try to note every detail. So which vessel, which port, at what time, the driver, the nationality, as much as possible. And then that's being combined in a tool that calls Tableau. And I send it every morning to all the stakeholders, so the Dutch authorities. And also when we find immigrants, we ask the customer to share the GPS data, which I can send to the seaport police for investigation. And it looks like there's been a trend that the customers are avoiding the Dutch parking spaces. And we see now that they are concentrating on the German, it's always the Germans, it's also the Germans parking spaces, which we see now a trend they are climbing into.
And just finally, for any companies that would be interested in this, what advice can you offer to them who, if they find themselves dealing with the migrant intrusion for the first time?
And the most important thing is always the UK Border Force checklist. We still see customers delivering a unit without a seal, without a tear line. Yeah, that's just an open invitation. And just before you enter the terminal, just ask your driver to do an extra check on the tear line, because they're so smart. It's always behind a buckle set, and then that makes it really difficult. But it's just a hard pull makes a lot of difference. It's just an easy task just before they enter onto the terminal. And yeah, when a driver feels he has immigrants, they always report to our security team, and then yeah, we find them and then give them blankets and water, because that's also with immigrants, there's still people.
Richard, thank you very much. Ilya, let me come to you now. Of course, it's difficult to talk about Russia right now, but in the last calendar year, we saw another increase in recorded incidents of cargo crime. Firstly, can you give us an overview of the cargo crime situation in Russia and the risks that companies face?
Right. Thank you so much for, first of all, right, and I'm pleased to be invited here and to share my experience. And I would start really, if you let me do that, with my personal approach, how we came to this cargo crime reporting together with TAPA. And in 2020, I actually, due to the COVID pandemic and very difficult situation, I was running a joint project to increase cargo crime reporting together with TAPA. Actually, with my local partners, we established an industry initiative, right, called Impact. Some of you probably heard about this initiative. There was a report last year together with TT Club, TAPA, and Impact, highlighting the cargo crime threats in Russia, right? That if you are interested, I probably, if I'm not mistaken, this report can be accessed through the TAPA website, right? And this is a kind of personal initiative, right, to do something to increase cargo crime reporting and to understand the magnitude of the problem locally. Therefore, we just collected data from the very interesting source from the arbitrary court proceedings, which are free of charge and free accessible in Russia. Maybe in some of the European countries it's the same situation. So we built the baseline incidents out of that free proceedings, right? So we started to understand what is there, what is the character of the cargo crime, I would say, phenomena in Russia. And then we started to identify the threats. And if just maybe to answer your question, we were very surprised that the most frequently used, or not used actually, most frequent location, right, for cargo crime is actually a shipper warehouse because of fraud. Fraudulent pickup, we will already discussed today, is a greatest threat, and all the data that we've seen for Russia, and you can play yourself. If you filter the cargo crime reports for Russia, you will see that 80% is fraud. So it means shipper location, your companies, I mean, less and less, unfortunately, with the current situation, but shipper location is the #1 cargo crime hotspot in Russia.
And you just mentioned the work that you were doing, some of that, the aim of which was to understand the magnitude of the problem. Can you give us a picture of the magnitude of the problem?
In terms of the overall numbers?
In terms of the cargo crime situation, or?
That's again, just give you a little bit of background. So this database and this platform, what we called Impact, is built in a very close partnership and collaboration with TAPA, right? And we have a incident share agreement, and we supply data to TAPA in order to build the overall picture. And this is, I would say that was a very prospective and very great initiative, closely supported and closely aligned with TAPA. And the overall losses, of course, they are, let's say we report losses for 1 billion rubles every year, even more, right? We started to get more or less consistent numbers since 2016. So in dollar terms, I would say in euro, it's something about 150,000 euro, thousand euro, million, I'm sorry, 100 million euro per year, sorry.
And are there any specific risks that companies face that you would say are different?
I would say companies and local shippers and local industry are absolutely not aware, generally not aware of the organized crime methods and tools that they use. And as I've mentioned, the #1 threat is fraudulent pickups. And I've met during my term in Russia within the last 18 months. It was just the effort to build this awareness, again, together, closely aligned with TAPA and with the great support to conduct these official online trainings on FSR and TSR. And I think we made a record attendance in the last FSR training in October last year, where we had approximately 120 attendance. This is where we received an extremely positive feedback about TAPA standards, TAPA data, and the membership as well.
How do you think, Ilya, TAPA EMEA can get more reliable sources of cargo crime intelligence from Russia and the CIS?
I would really put this in a slightly different perspective. Yeah, with local initiatives like Impact, right, which are built on ambassadors, local ambassadors, right, initiatives, volunteers. Just maybe it's a way forward. I don't know, to increase reporting of cargo crime, to build local data banks of data with the local industry, exchanging values from a local perspective from one side and from TAPA on the other side, because expertise, knowledge, and best practices that can benefit the local communities are extremely uncharted. This is why I would say to suggest this model to build local initiatives, right? I can, of course, I can share my experiences personally, right? In order to build this continuous, consistent reporting. And that's the #1 perspective. Always Torsten refers to it, report your incidents. This is what I was saying locally for 18 months. Please report your incidents. And one more thing, when we build this database locally, right, which now accounts for about 5,000 incidents, our local insurance companies came to us and say, if we share our data with you, can we get access for the common database free of charge? And we said, of course, yes. And we have now 5 top insurance companies are our members locally, sharing their data, absolutely getting services to their clients, increasing awareness of their clients, increasing overall cargo theft prevention best practices there. So, and I know that there are some insurance partners here, members of TAPA. Please do not be afraid to share your data. I know you are sitting on a lot of cargo crime data. Don't be afraid to share it. And this is the starting point with closer collaboration and overall benefit for the industry.
Ilya, thank you. And I can see you're getting quite a lot of agreement from your fellow panel members there as well. Dario, to finish with you, moving to number 8 on our top 10 country list, could you also give us a brief overview of the cargo crime situation in Italy and the risks that companies face?
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be here again.
Could you just
after
move a
few
bit
years.
closer?
Sure.
That's great. Thank you.
Again, I may say that situation in Italy is coming quite better respect the previous periods toward the reporting of the issues and the compiling of the IIS files, since we had experienced since a lot of time some kind of unwilling of getting data into the database. So we experienced that they were, in the past years, they were underestimated towards the reality. Now we are facing a huge increase of events this year or maybe also last year.
Dario, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I'm not sure that we're getting you on the microphone very well. Could I just ask you to move it closer to you? Right to the edge of the desk would be great. Or you.
I will.
If you speak really close into it, that's great.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Again, I was saying that numbers are increasing and targeted goods are changing. We experienced a change on targeted goods that if last year or 2 years ago were maybe high-tech or perishable, or pharmaceutical, now we had a switch on the last period targeting on fashion goods due to the change of the assets around the world for the volume, the capacities, and whatever. And we experienced this kind of switch. The modus operandi are always the same: theft from trailer, hijacking, or also small and light pilferages, but continuously happening all over the supply chain. And we are trying to increase the responsibility within our members through the working group in order to push them to compile correctly all the files, share all the information when issues are rising up, but not so easy. You know, it's such a kind of habit in our country to keep the things quiet, not to share, especially the bad news happening within their organizations.
And I have this number of 178 cargo thefts in Italy in 2021.
Yeah.
Is that really an accurate picture of what's happening?
Of course not. As said before, is underestimated.
Yeah.
is quite closer to the reality now, is better than, an instant, 2 or 3 years ago, since some kind of awareness within all the colleagues involved into supply chain security rises up a different responsibility, and they are more willing to give information. But I guess we are halfway to complete this path, since we have to work again a lot on this topic.
And in terms of trends, you touched a little on those. What would you say are the major crime trends happening in Italy that you're seeing?
I'd say hijacking, of course, and theft from trailer, theft from vehicle. Since, as we saw before, we had a lot of certified facilities within the country. We have a huge number, but lower rather than facilities of tracking companies certified. We do not have any secure parking, whatever, we just one. It's not enough, so the exposure of the goods within the supply chain during transportation is really high, and that's the place or the ambient where theft took place, and also the lack of space, physical space, where trucks could recover during the trips gives this high number at the end of the period.
And you touched on this a little earlier, but maybe you could elaborate a bit further. What's the local TAPA EMEA team doing to help the situation? And you just spoke about secure truck parking areas, maybe in terms of that area to improve the situation and get more.
We are working in order to create such a kind of communication with all the stakeholders for this need. Also because we know that the STTP parking from the European Commission is going to be launched or declared, or is going to become official, even if it's not, of course, targeting the same targets as TAPA are reaching. And we are trying to push all the potential stakeholders for this kind of certification to get closer to the standards and to start preparing all the areas or the parking areas and create such a kind of awareness on this field that's absolutely, not correctly evaluated within our country.
Thank you so much, Dario. I'm just going to come back to you, Torsten, for a couple of very quick questions. But if anybody does want to ask a question for any of our panel, then please do put your hand up or stand up so that our TAPA EMEA team with the microphones can come to you. I can see one here, actually. Thank you. Do stand up and introduce yourself.
Hi, Elizabeth Lewis, representing Amazon. It's a question really for Andre. To what extent do you feel that cargo crime in South Africa differs to cargo crime that is seen typically across the rest of the EU? So, for example, levels of violence used in attacks or MOs used. And then a second part of the question, if I may, if you do see a difference, to what extent do you feel that the TAPA certifications account for the difference is in the cargo crime that you see, given geography, threat environment, and infrastructure availability, please?
Sure. Unsurprisingly, me. To start off with your second question, if I may, many companies in South Africa still operate with a very poor basic security system in place. And there's sort of a tendency that if you're not hit, there's no issues, then why spend money on it? But as I said earlier, that will change. The TAPA, FSR, TSR does make a difference, and it proves itself. The same in Europe, I suppose, but everywhere it's the same for us. The moment they have the certification, it makes a big difference because all aspects of the operation are looked after security-wise. So yes, definitely, it's almost a no-brainer. And there's return on investment, if I may use that word then. Amazing return on investment. So on the first instance, yes, cargo hijackings in South Africa, I've witnessed personally some of those happening in my years, and up to 10 vehicles may approach a truck. And first of all, the first target is the armed escort vehicle. So if the armed escort vehicle is typically a marked vehicle and they know these guys because they observe for over a month probably to see what exactly is happening, how do they do the movement. It doesn't make a difference whether they choose routes or change routes because the last mile is actually where the problem might be. We in South Africa have, to a certain extent, started to move away from an armed visible escort to covert escorts, and it's proved itself, in my experience, very much that you keep them guessing, because that's the first target. The truck is always the second target. Now, I'm talking about vulnerable movements, and in South Africa, most electronic movements happen with armed escorts. You have to let them guess. We might use 3 or 4 vehicles, and even the client doesn't know this. So he pays for 1 or 2 or whatever the agreement is, but that's the type of arrangement that we as companies do internally to keep everybody guessing, because your system is only as good as the last person that you fired, isn't it? So if that answers your question? Sure.
Thank you, Andre. Any other questions from the floor? Not that I can see. Well, do stick your hands up if you do have a question before we finish. Torsten, let me just ask you a couple of questions before that, though. From what I'm hearing, it seems like this boots on the ground policy is so important, isn't it? Because it's not just the differences in the crime that's being committed, but the cultural differences in the country in terms of, as Dario was talking about, the reluctance to report, for instance, particularly in Italy. How many sort of cultural differences are we seeing? How important is that?
Yeah, I think the first thing is the language barrier. So it's easy that we all speak English here, in an international conference with an international association. But France is a lovely country, it is. But try to speak English in France. So I wish you good luck, So, and if you go to Italy, as already said, so it's in some areas in Italy, forget it. They don't speak English. And so the language barrier is the first thing. And secondly, I've been in South Africa, 10 times. I think I visited Andre. For me, South Africa is a lovely country. Why? Because I'm a tourist. I don't see South Africa. I see all the nice places. I've been picked up by my friends. They show me what's going on. I've been in Moscow together with Ilya. We had a company policy in my company, do not use the underground. It was forbidden by my company in Moscow. Ilya looked at me and he said, buddy, I'm Moscow, I'm Russia. So we went to the underground, and it was the best experience, honestly speaking, I ever had. It was amazing, but of course he's speaking Russian, he knows it, he knows what's going on. It's the same if you go to, I know it's not Europe, Middle East and Africa, but if you go to Sao Paulo, Brazil is a lovely country. But always follow the rules from the local because they know what's going on. It's the same as I said. If you go to Nelson Mandela Square, trust me, go there and go to the butcher store. It's the best restaurant, but do not leave it when it's dark outside. Okay? So don't do it. It's very easy. Don't leave the hotel when it's dark outside. Don't do it. And that's the reason why we need you. We need your local expertise. As you said, it's the foot on the ground. That's the most important thing.
Ilya, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I see that just to respond to that question, to that challenge, right? How to increase cargo crime reporting. So there is, in any cargo crime, there are 2 or maybe 3 parties, right? A shipper, a cargo owner, its supplier, and its insurance. So it's very difficult to understand who should report this crime, right? This is a very challenging question. I would say, being in the role of a cargo owner, right, from my previous job in JTI, in tobacco industry, we always said to our suppliers, we don't want you to report cargo crime, we will report it ourselves. Yeah, because we have resources, we know how to report it correctly, in order not to give too much sensitive details, which TAPA in any way will sanitize, will not publish, right, on the IIS and new TIS system. Therefore, this is only when you have your own experience and resources. And I understand how important it is to report a cargo crime. But in other companies, it's not obvious. Sometimes shippers prohibit their suppliers to report any incident, not just a cargo, any incident with their cargo, right? And this is the challenge we need to resolve here, right? In order to make our members confident that their data will not leak, their data will be sanitized and secure. This is very important. You need to decide who reports the cargo crime.
Thank you, Ilya. And well, Torsten, on that note, let me give you the final word that you'd like everyone to take away with them into the coffee break. What's the one message that you would like them to take, not only into the coffee break, but forever, in terms of how intelligence is the key to fighting cargo crime?
You know, I think I already said that. Numbers make a difference. And if I can prove my number, you know, and if I can explain my story to your CEO or CFO, that's how we break the ice. And it's always important that we look at that, okay? Sometimes it takes a while. You know, don't get me wrong, it's perfectly fine. And it's not always easy. So there are statistics in the world you would love to be the number one. You would love to be the number one and the biggest revenue. You would love to be the number one when you have the fastest sports car in the world. But there are also statistics where you hate to be the number one. And one statistic you don't want to be the number one is losses in the industry. But as already said by Ilya, you won't see that. All our data is 100% really neutralized. You don't see a company, you don't see, you cannot see it. You know, and if you tell us, as I mentioned already, don't show my details, only show my totals, we show only your totals. You know, but report cargo crime. Because at the end of the day, we all fight the same fight against organized criminals attacking us every day. And yes, sometimes you are lucky, sometimes you are not.
Gentlemen, thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you.